Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about how I actually mix some of these songs. People have been asking me for a long time to do a video like this, so yeah, here it is. I'm not really much of a studio expert, so this is going to be pretty layman's terms for the most of it, but this is how I do it. So anyway, I'm going to be working with the song She Said, She Said. The video link is in the description. Yeah, I like the way that the mix turned out on this one. It's a little bit of an older mix, but I'm just going to go through each of these tracks first, and this is what they sound like once they've already been mixed. So just to show you, I have isolated tracks. I like to start with everything already being isolated. So here's an example. Here's the drums. Bass. Rhythm. Okay, so you get the point. All right, so I use Sony Acid. I know it's kind of an old program. For whatever reason, I've heard the logic that if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I'm comfortable with this software, and yeah, that's why I've been using it for so long. In another video, I'm going to do something about the drums. And this software has a piano roll editor, which even the newer version of, I think it's Music Studio, doesn't have. So that's another reason why I still use Acid Pro 7. Anywho, so here's the drums. Now these were done on Easy Drummer. I like to do Easy Mix now. I used to use the Sony plugins. This gives you a really good way of kind of like you can mix your own effects or select from a ton of different presets and then do those. So would definitely highly recommend anything Toontrack puts out. It's a fantastic company. Okay, so this is what the drums sound like just by themselves. Oop, there it is. All right, so I guess when I do the drums, I always mix drums right in the center. So you can see this is in the middle of the track. It kind of works because drums are stereo a little bit on their own because the snare and everything is off to one side and the hats and the cymbals are off the other. So I personally like to use this multiband exciter preset for this particular song. Had a little bit of distortion on it, and I thought it worked with the 1966-ish feeling. So so you could definitely hear how that makes it a lot punchier, gives a lot of excitement, hence the exciter. So that's the drums. All right, now here's the bass. When it comes to the bass, let's see here. Yeah, I didn't roll off anything. Okay, so when it comes to the bass, again, same kind of deal. Raw, it sounds like this. Put the mix over it. This is a tape drive filter that kind of adds more effect to the bass. And you'll also notice that bass, again, right in the center. I don't know, I've heard that keeping bass and drums right in the center just gives it a good feeling. A long time ago, you guys might notice that my older songs, I have it bass and drums panned like all the way to the left. I don't know. That was like from listening to old 60s records, and if you notice, they did really bad stereo mixing back then. They'd put all the bass and drums to one side and all the vocals the other side. Like with the Beatles is actually a great example of that. I don't do that anymore. I don't think it sounds very good on modern systems, especially with headphones. It's just terrible. So, anywho, bass and drums in the center. That's what I'd recommend. Okay. I also want to mention at this point, I have a master effect going over all these tracks, which is a multi-band master. For this one, I added a little air and loudness. Otherwise, all these tracks are very soft, so just keep that in mind that there is a master filter, and always do that once you've mixed everything. Hey, I'll just show you. Like, if it doesn't have that, this is what it would sound like. Make sure that's still on. Cool. It's really not that much different. It's just the master gives it a little bit more depth and adds some sound loudness, I guess. Alright, so I hope that makes sense. I'm going to leave it on for now because otherwise the individual tracks can be kind of hard to hear. So Yeah, it's gonna stay on. In terms of the volume, I haven't really talked about this yet, but usually what I like to do is mix each tracks individually and then kind of add them one at a time. So all these numbers are what I've decided, I guess, is that what they sounded good to my ear. So I mean, so for me, I thought that that mix of bass and drums is good. There's no secret answer for this. That's kind of the art of mixing. You just have to listen to it and, do what you think sounds good. I just want to mention I didn't do it in this song, but a lot of times people will take the EQ and kind of roll it off around like 100 down here to get rid of like the lowy, muddy, low bass frequencies. I guess I didn't find it necessary in the song, but on certain tracks you might want to consider doing that. A lot of people will definitely roll off those low frequencies. All right, on to the rhythm. This one, it looks like I added just a standard guitar bus. I got a pretty good tone from this one on its own using the Rickenbacker. And it sounded great the way it was, so I really didn't need to add too many effects on it. And you can see, I mean, all these have EQ added by default, but there's nothing really done to it. It's just a flat. So I haven't messed with the EQ for any of these tracks. Man, that sounds awesome. I mean, even with no effects, even if I turn the master off. Yeah, that's what it sounded like coming out of my amplifier. So, yep, that's one of those reasons why you blow a shit ton of money on expensive guitars. So, anyway, wouldn't be able to afford to do that now. So let's see here on the rhythm. Where was I? Yeah. So it looks like I just added a basic guitar bus. Yeah, I mean for the most part that just added a little bit of compression to it. You can hear it goes throughout the whole song. Yeah, a little bit of distortion, very like on the edge of distortion. I like the way that one came out. Uh, so 50% left. Why did I do that? I don't know. For some reason, when it comes to rhythm and lead guitars, I like to pan these ones. So the rhythm I just chose to put to the left on this track. You could do it 50% to the right or 75% to the right or 25%. It all depends on how wide you want to make your stereo mix. But okay. So anyway, yeah, 50% to the left. I don't know. It's really up to you. I like to pan different instruments to the left and the right so that you can actually hear the difference between them. Um, yeah, I mean, otherwise they all kind of just blend together. Although you might want that for certain tracks, so it really depends on the song. Again, same thing with the volume. The way that this one came out recorded, I guess probably because I had turned up the gain on my amp a little bit to get that kind of distortion sound. You notice that it's at negative 12.5 decibels. It's a little bit lower than the rest of the tracks, but that's just because the recorded track was just slightly louder. So, anywho, so far, I'm gonna play it with just those three tracks so that you can kind of hear what I would have been working with at the time with those effects. Just make sure everything's applied. All right, cool. Okay, so at this point, it sounds a little empty on the right channel, and that's because we're missing this instrument. I don't know why it's at 6.9. I usually keep them at even numbers, but whatever. So this one is actually goes throughout the whole song, and you might notice this, but this one looks like I put a high boost on it so that it would cut through. So this would be it without anything. Yeah, pretty much. And I guess the high boost just adds a little treble. It's so minor, but yeah, I mean that's what I put on it. That's a weird track, by the way. I mean, you wouldn't expect it to run through like the whole song. A lot of people don't hear this riff. Listen to this. Now let me play that again. I'll do it from here. One of the fun things about mixing your stuff is that you can start listening to individual things. So, like, how did I decide that I wanted this at -7 or whatever? I probably listened to it with this track to see if the balance would sound good, and this is kind of what I would hear. I mean, you can play with any combination of it just to make sure at any given time all instruments and all tracks are always audible, or at least they sound clear. If there's one that starts to, like, you can't hear it anymore now that you've added another track, you should probably mess with it. So. That's just a fun thing to do, even if it has nothing to do with your mixing. I always do that just because it's cool to listen to the tracks together and see what they sound like with certain ones missing and shit. So, all right. Anywho, let me just keep going through here. Okay, just want to make sure all my tracks are on. Usually, I don't go back and unmix stuff. So, this is the lead guitar track. I kind of think of lead guitar, especially if it's a riff, it's kind of like a vocal, you know what I mean? So I'd like to keep it kind of towards the center, but not 100% center. I put this one a little bit to the right. I mean, that's probably because there's a lot of crash cymbals on the left already with the rhythm. And really all I have to the right so far is just this backing guitar track, which is just that droning note. So for this one, let me see, it looks like, yeah, same thing. I just put a high boost on it. It's really not much of a difference. And this track actually is pretty much just that riff that you hear. You get the point. This is actually, in case you want to hear this, this is the cool middle part. Actually, the bass, there's a time change there, which is kind of tricky, actually. Check this out. That's some genius Lennon songwriting. All right, so back to, I'm getting distracted here. Yeah, actually, the only other interesting thing about that lead guitar is that it goes to like a little bit of a double time at the end and kind of does a call and response with the vocals. Here, I'll show you what I mean. You just have a fade. I'm going to talk more about that later. This is bad. Don't do this. All right, let's see. That riff that I told you to intertwine, by the way, you can kind of hear it more here if you play it with the main guitar. Check it out. Let's see. You can see they were getting real creative at this point, but all right, so that's that so far. Everything looks like it's good. At this point, I would probably move on to the vocals. I mean, usually when I would record the vocals, I would probably have all this just done already. So I would hear the track and it would just be... I mean, so for me, that sounds pretty decently mixed so far. So at this point, I'd go on to the vocals. Okay, so here's the vocals that everybody wants to know about. All right, so the main vocals right in the center. I always do that. I don't know why. I just like the vocal in the center. A track like this is gonna have a vocal double, and I don't like to put it right on top of the other one. I guess sometimes I'll keep them at the same volume, but in this case, what I did was I panned it just ever so slightly to the right. It looks like 5%. So here's the main vocal first, and as far as the effect that I put on it, this is just a vocal bus. It looks like I also added a layer of Sony reverb. Pretty standard shit, but I mean, for the most part, here's what it sounds like, just completely dry. She said, I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. You got it. So when I added the effects on it, it just basically gives it a... And if you notice, I'll play it first. She said, I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. Looking back, I might even tone down that reverb a little bit, but I mean, if you listen to those bootlegs of the Beatles, Abbey Road just has like this echo chamber sound to it where it's like everything is super echoey, so it seems to work in the scope of the mix. But anywho, it looks like I did the exact same thing for, yeah, so the double is the same effect. Here's the doubled track, which, by the way, a lot of people will just, like literally just duplicate their track. You can do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to have a more like kind of interesting sound, you'll sing it twice, and that's what the Beatles would have done. So anyway, here's the duplicate. She said, I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. And she's making me feel like I've never been born. Yeah, and so when they're together, actually, let me just see something. Looks like I put a little less reverb on the double track. Probably didn't want to drown it too much. That's a little interesting thing to note. So doubled together, and by the way, in case you're curious, the sound waves are literally different. That's because they're two different vocal tracks. They're not recorded at the same time. So, well, they're sung twice over. She said, I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. And she's making me feel like I've never been born. All right, and you can see, like, when you sing it twice over, it's not exactly the same for both tracks, which gives it a whole, like, different level of cool variation and stuff. Same deal with these harmony vocals. I believe these were falsetto, actually, because I think George Harrison was the one that would have sang them. So let me see. And same deal. I messed with the reverb a little bit. Same vocal bus for both of them. Vocal, yeah, it's pretty standard stuff. All right, here's the bass track. I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. I know, it sounds pretty funny, right, by itself. Then, of course, you got the double by itself. I know what it's like to be dead. And, of course, together they sound like, I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. Isn't that cool? As soon as you double your falsetto, it stops sounding lame and it ends up sounding cool. I think there's some cool... She said, you don't understand what I've said. I said, no, you're wrong. All right, so anyway, at this point, I would probably mix the vocals first. And I would always do that. Like, oh, and by the way, you'll notice that for the harmonies, I actually spread those ones out a little, too. So I wanted to put the harmony to the left, and I put one of the tracks 7% to the left, and then I put the other one 5% to the left, just to kind of double with the other double. But yeah, you'll notice I've got the center one. This one's 5% right. That one's 7% left, and that one's 5% left. So they're all kind of basically in different areas. So I want them all to shine through. You know what I mean? So yeah, I would listen to the vocals now at this point to mix them with their levels appropriate for one another. So usually I would just I don't like listening to myself that much. So I'd skip to the harmony and I just make sure that it was, it was good.
I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad.
Sounds pretty good. And I'll go through here.
She said, you don't understand what I've said. I said, no, 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 you're wrong when...
So you can hear it. The falsetto is actually a cool effect because it doesn't take away from the main kind of heavy vocal, which is just like a Lennon chest voice thing. So backing vocals also have a call and response thing goes on at the end right here.
She said, I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. I know what it is to be sad. I know what it's like.
Something actually to point out, if you're ever thinking of covering this, notice how one of these tracks is slightly elongated. You can probably do both. I don't know why. It's something that I noticed when recording it. Check it out.
She said, I know what it's like to be dead.
It's just something cool that I thought I'd mention. All right, so anyway, at this point, what I would do is now that I've got the vocals all mixed properly, I would probably select those and mix them accordingly so that they would all move in tandem with each other and I wouldn't have to remix the vocal balance. But at this point, I think that this is the level that I thought sounded good, and
I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. And she's making me feel like I've never been born. She said, you don't understand what I've said. I said, no, 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 you're wrong when I was a boy.
by the way, everyone forgets that riff. If you want to hear it, I'll play it right now. It's kind of a weird riff and happens twice. All right, so I'm happy with the mix right now. At this point, usually I wouldn't have applied the... Well, I guess sometimes I would just because I like mixing it with the master on it, just because it gives me a better idea of what the final track is going to sound like. You want to mix it and then add the master and then be like, oh, it sounds totally different now because I've added a different effect. Usually I actually don't use this one, the multi-band master. I usually go for a more I think I usually do use like a master one, which is more of a limiter or a parallel squash or whatever. But for this one, it looks like I just left it on multi-band master, which is cool. It gives it a lot of loudness and air to the song. I guess it was appropriate for this track. Something I'm also going to point out here, you might have noticed that look at all these individual fades that I did. So I said before not to do this. This is just the guy that doesn't really know how to mix it or use a software properly. This is how you do that, and that's me. So if I were going to do this now and go back and do this, first thing I would do is cut the tails off all these tracks. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so now I'm going to take all these tracks, and I am going to remove all of that. And I know that the fade was about right there. The easier way to do this is to go to the master, which is this track down here. Start your fade right there, and then you can lower it down there. And what that does is that instead of fading each track individually, it's just going to fade the whole master, which is, unless you have a specific reason that you want to fade a certain track before others, which a lot of songs are like that. Maybe you want to fade the drums out and end on an acapella. But otherwise, you just fade the whole master. I think I usually like to do a fast fade because it's kind of like a quick... You could also do a linear fade, which is just more of a gradual one. You can hear it'll do this. Actually, that's a fun little trick if you want to see. This is the actual end of the track. All of them end like this. If you're ever curious. So if you notice, that fade was actually a little early, and it kind of revealed that. I would probably be more likely to you know, fade it probably around here. Why does it keep doing that? There we go. Yeah, it works for me. And pretty much that's the process, man. After that, I would go to File, go to Render it. You can do a real-time render. I guess sometimes if you have like any, glitches or whatever, you could do that, and it just literally you have to wait for the track to render in real time. So you can see something that I'm working on from a window that's coming up soon. It's for you soon. But yeah, I would always render it in Wave personally. And if you're gonna upload it or send it to anyone, use a program to convert it to MP3 or whatever after. But I wouldn't rely on the the software's MP3 codec or whatever. So just do it to Wave, and then you'll have a lossless file, and then from that point, yeah, you can render it to whatever you want. Something else to mention, right here, if these were all gone and I had my master track here, so I do all the recording on a, an actual 8-track, right? So I would take this and render just these 5 tracks, so the instrumental basically, and then I would transfer that to my recorder so that I could sing over it. That would also have to be in Wave, because as far as I know, most recording units and any kind of board, from my experience, they don't accept MP3s. It's always just better to use Wave. I mean, if you're going to record something, keep it lossless and save the master for yourself in a lossless format as well. FLAC is cool too. But Wave is just kind of one of those universally accepted formats that works and everything. So I think that's about it. I don't really know what else to say, but that's the video, and I hope this helps somebody on how to mix songs. It's not a magic trick. It's just take some time and listen to it until it sounds good. Cheers.
If you don't take her